Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to be continuing our series on the classes from Pathfinder Second Edition with the Monk. The Monk is a great frontline character. They're also sort of, I refer to them as like free safeties. They can really sort of bounce around and fill a lot of roles in combat. And overall, they're pretty strong in Second Edition with really good defensive options. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk stats and progression. With the Monk, your key ability score is going to be a choice of Strength or Dexterity, and you're going to get 10 hit points per level, so pretty standard for frontline classes. For Perception, you'll begin Trained, and that will go up to Expert at 5th level. You'll also, for your saving throws, you're going to be Expert in Fortitude, Reflex, and Will, all from the get-go. And unlike most of the other classes, the Monk doesn't really progress any of its saves at set levels. Instead, you're going to have what's called Paths to Perfection. And it's a really fancy term. What it amounts to is, beginning at 7th level, you're going to choose one of your saves to become Master. At 11th level, you'll choose one of the other two saves to become Master. And then at 15th level, you'll choose one of those two Masters to become Legendary. So that's pretty strong. You get to create your own taper, which is very unique for this class. None of the others do that, to my knowledge. So it really allows you to, if you're playing in a campaign where you're making a whole lot of will saves, for example, you know how to build your Monk, and that's pretty neat. The fact that there's also a general feat that would allow you to get one of your saves up to Master if it wouldn't normally be, means that you as a Monk can have two Master saves and a Legendary save, which is, again, just defensively very strong. For skills, unlike most of the other classes so far, you're just going to, you're not going to have a specific skill that you're default trained in, but you are going to get 4 plus your intelligence modifier that you're trained in. And for attacks, you're going to be trained in simple weapons and unarmed attacks. And that's going to go up to Expert at 5th level and Master at 13th level. And you're going to get Weapon Specialization at 7 and Greater Specialization at 15. Now, some of you may be thinking, whoa, hold on. How is the Monk not getting Legendary unarmed attacks? Like, shouldn't that be the only class that does it? Well, it sort of still does, and we're going to talk about that when we get into the Monk's class features. What they do get, however, is Legendary Defense. So, for their defenses, which is only for unarmored, they are untrained in all armor types. But for unarmored defense, they begin Expert, and then that's going to proceed to Master at 13, and then Legendary at 17. So as high a defense as the champion that we already covered, and believe me when I tell you that in play, that extra +2 on defense is very noticeable. So your Monk is definitely going to be one of the harder to hit players on the battlefield at any given time. And then for class DC, which is primarily used for things that you get with your feats, certain types of effects, and your focus spells. You're going to begin trained with your class DC. That will progress to Expert at 9 and Master at 17. Now, what's interesting about focus spells that Monks do get, they call them key spells, you don't actually ever have to have any, which is really cool. We'll talk about, what that means for the types of builds that you can make. But if you do decide to have focus spells with the Monk, you actually get to choose which tradition you want to use, if you want to use Occult or Divine. Those are your two options. So, seems like a strange choice, but it can be very important if you're planning to multi-class. Picking up a dedication for another class, or just an archetype that provides spellcasting of some sort, or that requires a spellcasting proficiency rank or something. I don't think there's any that specifically require just a spellcasting rank. Most of them require prepared spells or whatever, but again, future-proofing, it's definitely a potentiality in the future. So So that's pretty cool and pretty interesting that you may have better saves and attack rolls for your spells if you multi-class than, a fighter might. So it's just something to keep in mind. So for your class features, your standard progression, at level 1, you're going to get Flurry of Blows. That's a single action attack that you can make in combat where you actually get to attack twice. There's restrictions on attack weapons you can be using, but what's interesting there is that you're not reducing that attack penalty. So both attacks will still have that penalty. All your subsequent attacks for that round will also take the penalty, but it allows you to only use one of your actions to make those 2 strikes. So it's just an action economy hack. What's really cool about this is the fact that the monk is so mobile, and so that allows you to take 2 full movements and then still be able to hit twice, which can make you a very troublesome sort of adversary on the battlefield for your GM. You're also at level 1, you're going to get Powerful Fists, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that monks sort of kind of do get legendary attacks with unarmed attacks. So what Powerful Fist does is it raises your fist attack or strikes from a D4 to a D6, and it allows you to freely make them lethal instead of non-lethal. Now, normally, to make a lethal attack with an unarmed strike, you would have to take a -2 to your attack. So the fact that you're not taking that -2 means that you are as good as a fighter could be at punching, so you're back to that level playing field. It's kind of a weird, hacky way to get there, but I think the idea was just to make sure that they were keeping fighter as the only legendary attacker, martial attacker. But this allows the monk to functionally be on par, but reduces the chance of any exploits so that you're going to be as good as the fighter if you pick up one of your monastic weapons. So, Zen archers looking at you like you're the reason they can't have nice things. It's just a nice little workaround where you're still effectively as good at punching as the best puncher out there, the fighter. So you're both on par, but because this is the monk, your defense is higher. So you're actually in a situation where in a straight fist fight, you would still probably beat the fighter, which is how it should work. You would definitely beat anyone else in a fist fight. But because of that additional legendary defense, you should still be able to challenge and defeat the fighter in pure fisticuffs. So don't be too sore about not getting to legendary unarmed attacks. It was a big point of contention for some of my players and just the community at large when everybody first saw it, but handled pretty well, I think. So beginning at level 3, that's when you're going to get your incredible movement. You'll get a flat 10-foot increase to your base speed. So whether that's 20 for some of the shorter, smaller characters and dwarves, or 25 for a human, or even 30 for an elf, just an additional 10. That's a lot. We just, in my game where I'm playing a barbarian, we just got a swashbuckler added in, and versus the fighter in the party who's wearing plate armor, just seeing that swashbuckler be able to just run ahead. Movement speed is very important in 2nd edition, especially with the reduced chances of encountering an attack of opportunity. So this mobility is just a huge benefit for the monk and something that you should not just sleep on. In addition to that initial boost of plus 10, that's going to go up by 5 feet every 4 levels. So at level 7, 11, and so on, you'll add an additional 5 feet to that movement. And, so that it will total out to be something like an extra 25-ish movement speed, which is a lot. Potentially doubling most characters' movement. So, you combine that with the fleet feat or some of the ancestry feats that will allow you to get an extra 5 feet, and all of a sudden you've got a character who can move in one action, what other characters can move, take their full turn to move. So, in the 3-action economy, just consider how strong that can be. Also at level 3, you're going to get Mystic Strikes. This doesn't give you any bonuses to attack and damage, but it does make your fists count for all other reasons as magical attacks. Why is that? Why does that matter if you're not getting any bonus? It's just for overcoming resistance. Some creatures are immune to non-magical damage, so your mystic strikes allow you to do that. At level 7, we get the aforementioned Path to Perfection. You get to pick one of your saves, which are currently at Expert, and raise it to Master. At level 9, you're going to get Metal Strikes. And Metal Strikes is just what it sounds like, just as with Mystic Strikes. It's going to allow you to count your fist as either cold iron or silver for the purposes of bypassing damage reduction. Level 11 comes your second Path to Perfection, so you get to raise one of your other saves that are still at Expert up to Master. At level 15, you get the third Path to Perfection, raising one of those that you raised to Master previously up to Legendary, as discussed in the saving throws section. And then finally at level 7, or not finally, but at level 17 you will get Adamantine Strikes, which means that your fists now count as adamantine, which will bypass many resistances. It's pretty much the best metal that you could use in terms of bypassing damage reduction or resistances, as they call it in this edition. So that, combined with some of the feats that I'll touch on in the next section, will definitely allow you to potentially have an answer for any kind of weakness or resistance that you may encounter. At level 19, you can no longer roll below a 10 on your first attack roll for the round. Let that sink in. If you roll a 2, that's a 10. If you roll a 9, that's a 10. That's pretty strong, especially, considering that it's a guaranteed roll that you always know when it's coming up, which means that you could set yourself up with one-time buffs and things like that, something that like if you have a talisman or anything like that, or somebody who's casting, buffs that only apply on your next attack roll or your next, landed strike. You're functionally almost guaranteed to make that, which can be devastating depending on your party makeup and what kind of bonuses they can give you. And the fact that it's not the times per day thing, it's just every round. First one's probably getting through. That is very strong and very cool. Really just an interesting sort of thing that is part of that overall kit of the monk of being, sort of mystically good. Whereas we talked about the fighter before, like they're just really well trained. The monk is more like heightened sort of, they're just operating on a different level in terms of, their environment and how they perceive things. And that, as such, that's actually a fortune effect. It's not described as just being skilled. It's described as, like they just sort of, almost like time slows down and they make sure they land that punch. So that's very, very unique, very cool. And that is pretty much it for your core progression for the monk. That's everything that you're going to get standard. Every monk will have those features. Now we're going to get into the feats and builds. So you may have noticed in the last section that we didn't talk about a subclass. Most of the classes so far have had some big choice that you make throughout your character's progression, usually early on, most often at first level. I believe pretty much always at first level, actually, in second edition, where you're making a decision like, your methodologies for the investigator, or your doctrine for the cleric, or your instinct for barbarian. But the monk, like the fighter, does not have anything like that. And maybe you might be thinking, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer, because they can be pretty flavorful options. Yeah, I can agree with that. But the monk, again, like the fighter, has so many options. And because you're not, locking yourself into an early game choice about how you're going to be playing that monk, that means that every single monk option is open to you. Everything that ever gets added, you don't have to worry about if some next book comes out and it's got a really cool monk feat. You don't have to worry about, but it's only for this type of monk and I'm not that kind of type of monk. It still may not fit your build or your design goals with that character, sure, but it's on the table for you without you having to talk to your GM and go, can I retrain that first level choice? I know we're level 12, but could we go back and retrain? So you don't have to do that. Like, it's So I kind of like that. I also really like, again with the fighter, how open it is to sort of create your own subclass. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's just dive right in. So with monks, like fighters, you get a lot of stances, but stances are a much bigger part of it, I feel, for monk than for other classes. Most martials will have some sort of stance, at least one they can drop into. But for monks, your stance gives you a really nice, but sometimes niche, passive ability, like a boost to speed, harder to trip you, things like that. Bonuses to like athletics and to jump, things like that. But it also gives you a unique strike, and that's when you're in that stance. That's the only strike that you can make. So like one of them is like the crane kick, and things, and just sort of. If you watch old kung fu movies, we talked a lot in The Investigator about. If you watch a lot of old detective movies or, read a lot of old detective, if Raymond Chandler's on your bookshelf, like, you're going to find some really cool stuff that you're into with The Investigator. And with Monk, you're going to find the same thing, but for, like, kung fu movies. Old school, like, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, that kind of stuff. There's all sorts to like in this if you're into those sort of films. So, those stances are very much like you might see in, like an old kung fu movie where there's the master of this style and the master of that style. There's an entry-level feat, and then there's usually one or two more that sort of hone in on some additional options within that stance. Like the crane stance. There's a drunken master stance for all those Jackie Chan fans out there, which is always been a very popular one in every edition of the game that I've played. There's also, tiger stance. Some of these are very much based on real, historical martial arts. Some of them are a little more out there. The Reign of Embers stance comes to mind, where your fists catch fire. You can have these characters that are very much like masters of these specific styles. And so that's super fun, super cool. Like, that alone can set your monk apart almost as if you had a subclass. You also have this huge suite of key spells. There's, I think, 13 available right now, but many of them have sort of multiple effects, or at least can be used in different ways. The biggest one for that is Key Blast, which can be used as just a single little bolt blast of energy, or it can be like a beam or even a cone, and the damage goes up, and that's all based on how many actions you use to cast that spell, which, if you've played or watched Dragon Ball Z, you know that, the longer you charge up that Kamehameha wave, the bigger and more devastating it's going to be, and it's right there, it's in the book, you can have a Kamehameha wave, and that is so fun, so good. There's also going to be key spells that are just going to let you add additional damage to your strikes, teleport short distances. There's also some to heal yourself, and then you can even turn ethereal or turn into, again, back to Dragon Ball Z, you can emit energy, just waves of ki, that just being near you can harm people. It allows you to fly, it allows you to give off light. Probably sounds a lot like something you're familiar with. So that's super, super fun that you can just go Super Saiyan. So you've got this whole like Dragon Ball Z style character that you can just build and evolve. And if you don't think that's fun, great, because there's so many more options here. There's also a lot of feats that are just based around grappling, and so if you want to build a character who's very Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu based, they have some options there for you. And going further, there's some very mystic options where where you can react to things that you shouldn't be able to react to, almost like you have eyes in the back of your head sort of thing, or even like being able to fight blind. So you can really go that sort of mystic, meditation, and like I said earlier, like a higher plane of existence type of a character. There's also the Zen Archer that was introduced in the Advanced Player's Guide, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a monk with a bow, and that can be pretty nasty and a lot of fun, especially if you have like deflect arrows, so then you're just catching an arrow and sending it back off, which is super fun. Other feats that you can get outside of these builds, there's a lot of feats to help you do superhuman feats of athleticism and acrobatics, running along walls, landing places where you shouldn't be able to land, things like that. And if you combine those with a lot of the great skill feats like run on water, or water sprint I think it's called, and cloud jump, you could have a very crouching tiger, hidden dragon type of a character who, is standing on branches of trees without them, bending over and falling. Who can leap across a pond and just touch a toe on the water here and there. So there's so many of these great monk fantasy or great martial arts fantasies that are built in, while also leaving room for a character who is just a brawler, who just, hits a little bit extra hard, who, is able to, make the most out of every opportunity, who's bobbing and weaving, very, like boxer, MMA type of a character. And then the fact that none of these are hard choices, you're not locked into them. You can combine these all into a character who does a little bit of everything, a character who is super focused and just just nailing down one single avenue, or a character who has a specialty, but still like a couple of fallback options. And that's what I like about these couple classes that we have so far that do not have that big choice, is it really does open you up to make a character that's wholly your own and totally unique. And again, because this is Pathfinder Second Edition, if you're coming from Pathfinder 1e or even D&D 5e, you may be looking at these and thinking, okay, but which ones of these are good? Which ones are the best? Pathfinder Second Edition, you don't have to worry about that. At least as of now, we're a year in. Right now, the only thing you need to do to be good at your class is continue to invest in your primary ability score. So for monk, it would be strength or dexterity. And make sure that you're keeping up on your fundamental runes. And that's all that you have to do. You are guaranteed to be good at what you want to do, which means that all of these options are just gravy. They're just fun, flavorful, useful, but not necessary abilities. So overall, the monk is incredibly wide open because of that lack of a subclass. So what do I think? Well, if it wasn't obvious, I really like the monk, actually. Sort of strange to say, but given my enthusiasm here, but monk was always one of my least favorite classes in previous editions. I just always sort of felt like there was just something missing from it, that it just didn't make sense to me, that I'm supposed to believe that, we've got this super powerful magical armor that the fighter's wearing, but the monk can just punch through it. However, a lot of the little flavor things, little minor things here and there that the monk has gained in Second Edition, just the more feeling like they are more tuned in, more just sort of next level. The fact that they are getting their fists, I don't know. I really don't know, but something about it just feels better to me. And the fact that I can choose what type of monk I want to be. I don't have to dial into this, higher mystic type of monk. I can just be a barroom brawler. Or I can, go, like I said, Dragon Ball Z. Or I can go old school Kung Fu. I have so many choices to make a unique monk. I don't know. I think that this is my biggest sort of 180 turn on any class, going from any edition to another. If you watch my videos, our videos on the champion, at first I was pretty sour on that because champion was one of my favorite classes, and then I didn't like the champion. The paladin was one of my favorite classes. I didn't really like the champion coming into 2e. Again, I said it before, I have since really come around. I love the champion. I think it is, once I got my head around the design space, the goals of that character, and started to understand more of the mechanics of the game, that is a very strong, very fun character and great to have in any party. So the monk is For me, it's as versatile as the fighter. It's got a little more flavor, and it's just way more out there in terms of your options. If you want to be the type of character that is highly mobile and has a lot of unique options as a martial character, the monk is probably a great option for you. With some of those feats, you have you have incredibly high defenses. You have ways to take a step. If somebody has the audacity to swing at you, just move back because you're too fast. You have ways to heal yourself if you get in a situation that's a little bit beyond what you were expecting. You have so many defensive tools combined with that legendary defense. And then on top of that, you have a lot of unique ways that you can that you can shut down an enemy. From things like the Medusa strikes, where you're turning people to stone as you hit them. It's one of your key spells. Or just the stunning fist option, where if you hit them, they are getting stunned. And then you combine that with the critical specialization. You've got 2 chances to stun somebody every time you hit them. Every time you use Flurry of Blows, rather. So, sort of 3 chances. That's nasty. And there's a good chance one of those is going to work out at least 1 out of 3 or 4 times. And the fact that you can also trip, you're going to be one of the better trippers in the game thanks to your feats. You're really good at grappling. Unlike a lot of characters, you can deal damage to something while you have it grappled. And one of my favorite feats is the Whirlwind Throw. You can scoop somebody up, and if there's a ledge, bye! Or, if there's an acid pit, or whatever it may be, just throwing somebody 30 feet in this game is pretty cool. And the fact that by level 6, you just have an ability where it's like, yep, throw them 30 feet. No GM shenanigans necessary. You can throw that bad guy 30 feet. He's not going to like it. So there's a lot of unique ways that you can sort of harry and vex an opponent. And you're paying for that by not dealing as much damage as a fighter or a barbarian or some of these other frontline classes. But because of your strikes, your key spells that can add elemental damage to your fists, and the strikes that are counting as metal and magic just for being them, as well as potential new strikes that you can obtain in different stances, like some of them, how you get weapon traits on like a normal martial. The monk, you can get these stances that might give a trip or a backswing or any number of effects to allow you to be pretty versatile in the moment. And so you can combine these abilities to, be constantly tripping enemies or grappling them or, stunning them and just moving away now. And now you're just eating up their action economy in a way that can really take something that is a lot stronger than you and make it feel much more on your level. You're really, you're punching out of your weight, for a boxing term. And that's really cool within this character. Whereas the fighter feels like they are better, the monk can make people who are actually better look like they're worse. And that's really pretty cool. And I think that overall, the huge number of build options, the way that you can customize that fighting style, the way that you are just so crazy mobile, and you have the Flurry of Blows just default, so you've got this great potential action economy. From level 1, very few characters from level 1, without having to choose anything, and therefore without having to make any sacrifices, are getting 4 actions around every round if they want to do them. And that's functionally what Flurry of Blows is giving you. So the monk is just a really nasty character to deal with, but a lot of fun to play. We have a monk in one of our games, and we had a monk in the other game. So I've definitely seen it in action with 2 very different builds, and both were quite impressive. So I think overall, the monk, really good, really solid. Do I think that it necessarily could be the primary tank of the party, like the primary frontliner? I don't really. I just don't think that it has necessarily as much ability to be the focus of a problem. However, because of its mobility, it makes a great secondary frontliner. It's, again, like a free safety in football. It's going to be, or like Bugs Bunny playing baseball, a monk can seem like they are everywhere. And that's something that, the rogue does really well, and the monk does really well, and the ranger can. But it's really valuable to have that if you have a barbarian or a champion or a fighter as your primary front line, to have this monk who can, within an action with 50 movement speed, within an action be flanking for whoever needs it, or, be putting themselves in between somebody, or, just stunning somebody, like just being everywhere they need to be to give the most to the party and vastly increase chances of success. Monk is awesome. I really recommend you play it. If you're playing a monk right now, great. Let us know down in the comments what kind of feat synergies have you found? What kind of old school movie inspiration did you use to make your monk? Just let us know down there. Also, let us know if you have any questions, any kind of videos you want to see, of course. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your input, whether it's the like, the subscription, or just the comments, really helps us to know what you want to see, and keeps us motivated to make more of these videos for you. So thanks so much for watching. Welcome to the Collective, and we'll see you next time for the Oracle. Bye.